David Parker was a rich man. He had a big house, many cars, and a job that made him famous and wealthy. Every day, he wore expensive suits and worked in tall glass buildings in the city. People knew him as a successful businessman, but David felt something was missing inside him. Life was full of meetings, money, and power, but he wanted to find something real, something that could touch his heart. One warm afternoon, David decided to take a walk outside. The city was busy, with people rushing to work or shopping, cars honking, and street vendors selling food. David liked walking in the city sometimes. It helped him think and feel calm. As he walked down the street, something caught his eye. Near a busy street corner, a small boy was standing alone. The boy looked poor. His clothes were old and dirty, and his shoes were broken. His skin was dark, and his hair was short and curly. The boy's face was tired, but his eyes were full of hope. He looked up at the people walking by and quietly asked, "Please, can someone give me some food?" David stopped for a moment. He saw the boy ask many people. Some ignored him, some shook their heads, but the boy never stopped asking. He never shouted or cried. He only asked softly, hoping someone would help. David felt a strange feeling in his heart. He had seen poor people before, but this boy was different. There was something about him that made David want to watch more. The next day, David went back to the same street corner. He wanted to see the boy again. Sure enough, the boy was there, again asking for food. David gave the boy some money and watched quietly as the boy smiled and said, "Thank you, sir." But then, the boy quickly turned and walked away without looking back. David was curious. He wanted to know where the boy would go after asking for food. So, he decided to follow the boy, staying at a distance so the boy wouldn't notice him. The boy walked slowly down the street, carefully avoiding busy roads and strange people. David followed behind, careful to stay hidden. The boy stopped at a small alley, a quiet and dark place between two buildings. David saw the boy enter an old, broken-down building. David waited outside for a moment, then slowly walked into. Inside, he found a small room with old furniture and cracked walls. The room was dark but warm. There were a few other children inside, sitting around a small table. They looked hungry and tired, but when they saw the boy, their faces lit up with joy. The boy gave them the food he had just received. They shared it quietly, not wasting a single crumb. David watched as the boy, whose name was Michael, smiled gently at the children. He was not just asking for food for himself, but for the others too. David felt a deep sadness and something else he could not explain. He saw how much Michael cared for the other children, how brave and strong he was. David realized that the boy was not just poor, he was a leader. He cared for others who had nothing, just like him. David wanted to talk to Michael, but he was afraid to scare him away. So, he left the building quietly, thinking about what he had seen. For the first time in many years, David felt something real. He wanted to know more about Michael's life and how he survived every day. The next morning, David came back again. Michael was there, asking for food in his soft voice. This time, David did not just give him money. He gave Michael a sandwich and a bottle of water. Michael took the food carefully and looked at David with surprise and thanks. David smiled and said, "I want to help you. Can I follow you again? I want to understand your story." Michael looked at David for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. It was the start of something new for both of them. As the days passed, David followed Michael every afternoon. He saw how Michael moved through the city, how he kept the other children safe, and how he shared his small gifts. David learned that Michael's family was gone, and he had to take care of his younger siblings and friends. David felt his life change. He had money, power, and respect, but Michael had something he did not: hope, love, and courage. David knew he could help Michael, but he also knew he had to listen first. One day, after Michael shared his food with the children, David finally spoke to him. "Michael," he said gently, "would you come with me? I want to give you a better place to live." Michael looked at David, surprised but careful. "I don't want to leave my friends," he said. "We take care of each other here." David understood. He nodded. "I want to help you all, not take you away. Let me help you build a place where you can be safe, where no one will be hungry." Michael thought for a moment. He looked at the children, who smiled and nodded. Then he smiled back at David. "Okay," he said softly. "But only if you promise to stay with us and understand." David smiled. "I promise." From that day, David's life changed. He was no longer just a rich man in a big city. He was someone who wanted to bring hope to children like Michael. And for Michael, a new friend had arrived, someone who saw beyond the hunger and the streets. David knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. But for the first time, he felt his heart was full. David's curiosity about Michael's life grew stronger each day. After their first conversation, David returned to the small, worn-down building that Michael and his friends called home. This place, though small and run-down, was filled with laughter and warmth that David never expected to find in such a difficult place. Inside the cracked walls, children shared stories, helped each other, and made the best of what little they had. David watched as Michael, despite his young age, took care of everyone. He gently helped a little girl who was shy and scared, comforting her with soft words. He fixed a small broken chair for an older boy with skill and patience, as if Michael had done this many times before. What struck David most was how Michael never seemed to complain or give up. Even when the days were tough and food was scarce, Michael's spirit stayed strong. One day, David decided to ask more about Michael's life. Sitting down quietly beside the boy, David said, "Michael, can you tell me about your family?" Michael's face grew serious as he looked away. "My mother and father are gone," he said softly. "I have my little sister and brother. I take care of them and the others here." David nodded slowly, understanding the heavy weight that Michael carried at such a young age. He asked more questions, learning about how Michael found food, how he kept safe, and how the children protected each other. Michael explained how sometimes kind strangers gave them small meals, but many days they went hungry. He talked about the dreams he had of a school, a place to sleep, and a chance for the children to have a better life. Listening to Michael, David felt a deep sadness mixed with admiration. He realized that Michael's courage was beyond what most adults had. Over the next few weeks, David came back regularly, bringing small gifts, food, books, and clothes. But he also brought respect and kindness, treating Michael and the children not as poor or forgotten, but as human beings full of hope. Michael started to trust David more, and even invited him to join their small group for meals. One evening, David saw how the children, despite hunger and cold, sang songs and told stories. Their smiles were real, their laughter full of dreams. David thought about his own life: the big office, the fancy parties, and the constant stress. None of that brought him the joy he felt watching these children support each other. He wanted to do more. One rainy day, when the city streets were wet and cold, David saw Michael help a smaller boy carry a bag of food they had collected from a nearby shelter. David followed them to an empty lot behind the buildings. There, Michael showed him a small garden they had started. It was just a few plants, but to Michael and the children, it was a symbol of hope, a promise that life could grow even in hard places. David felt tears in his eyes. He promised himself he would help this garden grow into something much bigger, a safe place where children like Michael could live, learn, and dream. But David also knew that changing things would not be easy. There were many problems in the city: poverty, fear, and people who didn't care. Still, David believed in Michael's hope. He began to visit city leaders and local groups, sharing Michael's story and asking for help. Slowly, doors began to open. People wanted to help, moved by the courage of one small boy who asked for food every day. Meanwhile, Michael continued his quiet fight. He worked hard to keep the children safe and together, teaching younger ones to read and helping with simple chores. His bravery inspired everyone around him, including David. One afternoon, David surprised Michael by bringing a small group of volunteers to help clean and fix the old building. The children worked alongside adults, painting walls, fixing windows, and planting flowers outside. The old building began to feel like a home. Michael smiled more than David had ever seen before. David realized that this was the start of something new, not just a better building, but a better life for these children. At the end of that day, Michael thanked David quietly, "You have given us hope." David smiled and replied, "No, Michael. You have given me hope." As the days passed, David and Michael's friendship grew stronger. David learned to see the world through Michael's eyes, a world where kindness and courage mattered more than money or power. And Michael learned that even in a big city full of strangers, there were people who cared and wanted to help. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange and pink, David stood outside the small building and thought about the journey ahead. He knew it would be long and hard, but with Michael's spirit and the help of others, he believed they could change many lives. Michael, standing nearby, looked up at the sky and whispered, "Maybe dreams can come true." David smiled, feeling for the first time in many years that his life had meaning beyond wealth. Together, they faced the future not as rich and poor, but as friends, united by hope and a shared dream for a better world. David's life had changed in ways he never expected, but the more he spent time with Michael and the children, the more he understood the true meaning of strength and hope. Michael was not just a boy asking for food, he was the heart of a community that had been forgotten by the world around them. One day, as David arrived at the old building where the children gathered, he saw Michael patiently teaching a younger girl named Sarah how to read. Sarah's small fingers traced the letters on a torn page as Michael pointed carefully, speaking softly to encourage her. David noticed how the children looked up to Michael, not just as a friend, but as a guide, a protector, and a teacher. Even though Michael had so little himself, he gave his time and energy freely to help others learn and grow. David felt a deep respect for the boy who carried such responsibility on his small shoulders. As the weeks went by, David continued to bring food, clothes, and books, but he also brought something more important: attention and belief. He made calls to local organizations, sharing Michael's story, and asking for help to build a better place for the children. Slowly, volunteers arrived to help clean the building, fix the broken windows, and paint the walls. David worked alongside the volunteers, but it was Michael who inspired everyone with his quiet determination. One afternoon, While David was helping to plant flowers outside, Michael pulled him aside. "We need a school," Michael said simply. "A place where we can learn, not just survive." David agreed without hesitation. He promised Michael he would do everything he could to make that dream come true. But the journey was not easy. There were many challenges: bureaucracy, lack of funds, and people who doubted that a group of poor children deserved help. David faced these problems with patience and persistence, but he never lost sight of Michael's hope. Meanwhile, Michael continued to care for the children. He taught the youngest how to say their names and helped the older ones write letters to people who might help. He listened to their fears and dreams, always offering a kind word or a smile. One cold evening, David found Michael sitting outside the building, staring at the stars. Michael told David about his dreams for the future, dreams not just for himself, but for all the children. "I want us to have a place where we can feel safe," Michael said quietly. "Where no one has to be hungry or afraid." David promised Michael that they would build that place together. With the support of the volunteers and the local community, they began raising funds and finding a safe location for the school and shelter. David was amazed at the generosity of people when they heard Michael's story. Slowly but surely, money came in, and plans were made. But as the project grew, so did the challenges. Some people in the neighborhood did not want change. They were afraid or jealous, and they said harsh things about the children and David's efforts. Michael felt the weight of these words, but he never gave up. Instead, he held the children close and reminded them that they were stronger together. David learned an important lesson from Michael, that true courage means facing fear and standing tall, even when others doubt you. One day, a group of children brought David a drawing they had made. It showed a big building with bright windows and happy faces. At the top, in big letters, they had written, "Our future." David's heart swelled with pride and hope. He knew that this future was possible because of Michael's strength and the children's belief in themselves. As construction began on the new shelter and school, Michael helped organize the children to keep the old building clean and safe. David often found himself amazed at the boys' leadership and kindness. It was clear that Michael was more than just a survivor. He was a young man with a heart full of love and a mind full of dreams. David's life had been full of success in business, but now he understood that true success was measured in the smiles of children, the sound of their laughter, and the hope in their eyes. One afternoon, as the sun set over the city, David and Michael sat together on a bench outside the construction site. They talked about the future, about school, about friends, and about the dreams that kept them going. Michael looked at David and said, "You showed me that someone cares. That I'm not alone." David smiled, feeling a warmth he had never known before. "And you showed me what real courage looks like." Together, they watched the workers build walls that would soon protect and nurture many children like Michael. David knew that this was only the beginning, but he also knew that hope had taken root. In the heart of the city, in a place that once held only hunger and fear, a new story was beginning, a story of friendship, strength, and a future full of promise. David's journey to help Michael and the children continued to grow, but it was not without many challenges. After months of hard work, the small shelter they had begun was becoming a real place where children could come to learn, eat, and feel safe. David had brought together many people, volunteers, local leaders, and even some famous names who wanted to support the project after hearing Michael's story. There was a kind woman named Oprah who visited once and donated books and school supplies, saying she believed in the power of education to change lives. Another day, a well-known musician named John brought instruments and taught the children songs to lift their spirits. With each visit, the children's eyes lit up with hope. Despite the progress, David still saw how hard life was outside the walls of the shelter. Many children in the neighborhood still faced hunger and fear every day. Michael worked tirelessly to find food for those who could not come inside, visiting shelters and talking to kind strangers who gave what little they could. David admired Michael's dedication and began to realize that money alone was not enough to fix such deep problems. He needed to change the hearts of people and inspire the whole community to come together. One afternoon, David organized a special event in the city park. He invited local families, volunteers, and even the children from the shelter. Michael and his friends prepared songs and poems to share with the crowd. The event was a celebration of hope and strength, a way to show that even in hard times, people could find joy and support each other. As the sun set, the crowd clapped and cheered for Michael and the other children. David saw tears in the eyes of many adults who had forgotten what it meant to have dreams and courage. That night, after the event, David and Michael sat quietly under a tree, talking about what had happened. Michael said, "I never thought people would care so much." David smiled and said, "People can change, just like you have changed my life." With each day, the shelter became more than just a building. It became a place where children learned skills, played games, and felt safe enough to dream. A teacher named Mrs. Anderson started volunteering to teach reading and writing. She was patient and kind, and the children loved her stories. David was proud to see Michael helping Mrs. Anderson with younger kids, showing him as a natural leader and a patient teacher. However, not all days were easy. There were times when funding was low, or volunteers were few. Some nights, Michael worried about the children still living on the streets. David stayed up late many times thinking about how to make their work stronger and reach more children in need. He began meeting with city officials and business leaders, sharing Michael's story and asking for support. Slowly, doors opened, and new partnerships formed. One day, a local company agreed to provide regular meals, and a doctor volunteered to give free health checkups for the children. David also realized that changing the community's mind was as important as fixing buildings. He spoke to schools and churches, encouraging people to volunteer and see the children not as problems, but as bright futures waiting to happen. Michael often joined these talks, sharing his story with simple words but powerful meaning. He told the crowd about his dreams to become a teacher and help other children one day. His courage inspired many to help in ways big and small. Over time, the shelter became known as a place of hope in the city. Children who once wandered the streets found friends, meals, and a chance to learn. David and Michael's friendship deepened as they worked side by side. David learned how to listen and how to be patient, while Michael learned that it was okay to trust others and ask for help. One evening, as the shelter's first winter approached, David helped organize a drive to collect warm clothes and blankets. The community responded with generosity, and soon the children were ready for the cold days ahead. Michael smiled, knowing they had come far but still had a long way to go. David felt a quiet joy in his heart, a joy that no money could buy. The journey was still difficult, and the city still had many problems, but together, they were building something real and lasting. David looked at Michael and said, "You have changed my life, and you are changing the city." Michael looked up with shining eyes and said, "We are all changing it, together." In that moment, under the soft glow of streetlights, two very different lives came together, one rich in money and the other rich in courage and hope to build a future where every child could dream and every dream could grow. As the months turned into a year, the small shelter that David and Michael had dreamed of became a real home filled with hope, learning, and laughter. The walls that once were cracked and broken now shone with bright colors, paintings made by the children themselves. Every morning, the sound of happy voices filled the air as children arrived for classes, meals, and play. Michael had grown stronger and wiser. He was no longer just the boy asking for food on the street corner, but a young leader who inspired everyone around him. David watched Michael with pride and admiration. He saw how the boy's courage had become the heart of the community, and how their friendship had changed both their lives in ways neither had expected. Together, they had built more than a shelter, they had built a family. But their journey was far from over. Even though the shelter was a safe place for many children, David and Michael knew there were still many others in the city who struggled alone. So, they decided to take their message beyond the walls they had built. They organized a group of volunteers and children to visit nearby neighborhoods, sharing food, books, and stories of hope. Michael spoke to crowds with calm confidence, telling his story simply but powerfully, touching hearts and opening minds. People from all over the city began to hear about the shelter and the children's courage. Local newspapers wrote stories, and soon, donations came from people who wanted to help. A famous basketball player, LeBron, donated sports equipment and promised to visit the children, saying he believed in their dreams. A successful businesswoman named Michelle helped set up scholarships so some of the older children could go to college. With each new friend and each new gift, the shelter grew stronger. David found himself busier than ever, not with meetings in tall buildings, but with meetings full of laughter, plans, and hope. Michael, too, was changing. He finished school with high marks and dreamed of becoming a teacher or a social worker to help children like himself. One evening, after a long day of work at the shelter, David and Michael sat on the roof of the building, watching the city lights twinkle below. Michael shared a story about a time when he was very scared and hungry, but still found strength in the kindness of a stranger. David listened quietly, feeling the weight and beauty of the boy's journey. He realized that true wealth was not in money or power, but in love, hope, and friendship. Together, they talked about the future, about expanding the shelter, creating more schools, and reaching more children. They dreamed of a city where no child would have to ask for food on the street, where every child would have a safe place to learn and grow. But David also knew that their work would never be finished. Poverty, fear, and struggle were problems that required many hands and many hearts to solve. He promised himself he would never stop fighting, just as Michael promised to keep leading with courage. Over time, the shelter became a symbol in the city, a reminder that even the smallest voice could bring change. Michael's story inspired others to believe in hope and kindness. David saw many children who once looked lost find their way, smiling and learning and dreaming. And he saw a city beginning to heal, one small step at a time. One special day, the shelter held a celebration for all the children and volunteers. People gathered from all around to share food, music, and stories. Michael stood before the crowd, looking around at the faces full of hope and joy. He spoke quietly but clearly, "We have come far, but there is still more to do. Together, we can make a better world, one child at a time." David stood beside him, feeling a deep happiness and peace. He remembered the first day he saw Michael asking for food on the street corner and how that small moment had changed his life forever. Now, they had built a family, a community, and a future. The city lights shone bright that night, but David and Michael knew the brightest light was the hope they carried inside. And so, the millionaire who once walked alone in the busy city had found a new purpose. Following the black boy who asked for food had not only changed his life but had also planted a seed of love and hope that would grow for many years to come.